How would you feel if the President of the United States said something like, "It was all very, very strange. Within days after the election, we witnessed an orchestrated effort to anoint the winner even while many key states were still being counted." And then how would you feel if Time magazine came out and said that he was right? Further, how would you feel if Time magazine felt good about this and thought it was something to celebrate? This is what Time magazine is putting forward as a good thing. There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists, not really left-wing activists, and business titans. If you're a left-wing activist, you don't make an informal alliance with business titans, no matter what. That's like voting for Joe Biden in the general election. You're not a left-wing activist if you vote for Joe Biden in the general election. What you are is a fucking sellout. And it gets worse. The AFL-CIO was involved too. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-noticed joint statement of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and AFL-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as a sort of implicit bargain inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive racial justice protests. We know we don't like that if we're on the other side of the class divide, in which the forces of labor came together. And these are not the forces of labor. These are the forces of the fucking sellout labor union leaders. They came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy. Well, it sounds very democratic how you were trying to oppose Trump's assault on democracy. And Time magazine, I'm talking to you because you're part of this cabal. Is cabal too strong of a word? Let's listen to Time magazine's description. The handshake between business and labor was just one component of a vast cross-partisan campaign to protect the election. That's a great way to protect it, to indoctrinate everyone into doing what you want them to do. An extraordinary shadow effort dedicated not to winning the vote, but to ensuring it would be free and fair. Well, that sounds free and fair to me. Credible and uncorrupted. Fuck you. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives, that sounds democratic, scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and an autocratically inclined president. Well, fight fire with fire, I always say. Fight an autocratically inclined president with an autocratically inclined cabal. Though much of this activity took place on the left, some left that is, it was separate from the Biden campaign and crossed ideological lines, with crucial contributions by nonpartisan and conservative actors. The scenario the shadow campaigners were desperate to stop was not a Trump victory. No, of course not. It was an election so calamitous that no result could be discerned at all, a failure of the central act of democratic self-governance that has been a hallmark of America since its founding. Now your bullshit detector should be going berserk. Their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws and help secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits. That sounds good. Recruited armies of poll workers. Oh, that sounds really good. Not shady at all. And got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against disinformation. That's me, folks. And used data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. Smears mean something you don't want to hear about Joe Biden. They executed national public awareness campaigns that helped Americans understand, yeah, what do you call that when you help Americans understand how the vote count would unfold over days or weeks, preventing Trump's conspiracy theories and false claims of victory from getting more traction. After Election Day, they monitored every pressure point to ensure that Trump could not overturn the result. And we should say Trump could not overturn the result, even if the result was bogus. The untold story of the election is the thousands of people of both parties who accomplished the triumph of American democracy at its very foundation. That's right. unless you think the very foundation is mainstream media and the people pulling their strings. That was a quote by Norm Eisen, a prominent lawyer and former Obama administration official who recruited Republicans and Democrats to the board of the Voter Protection Program. Well, that's how we should be protected, right? It only gets better. Skipping ahead, this is the inside story of the conspiracy to save the 2020 election. Save it. Based on access to the group's inner workings, never-before-seen documents, and interviews with dozens of those involved from across the political spectrum. It is the story of an unprecedented, creative, and determined campaign whose success also reveals how close the nation came to disaster. Every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome means Joe Biden gets elected, every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of the election was defeated, says Ian Basson, co-founder of Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan rule of law advocacy group. But it's massively important for the country to understand that it didn't happen accidentally. The system didn't work magically. Democracy is not self-executing. Now here's the best paragraph of all, and if you can put this into Time magazine with a straight face, you've got a big problem. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal, that's Time magazine's word, a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies, working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. Holy fucking Christ! They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it for Joe Biden. And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy, I can't believe they keep using that word, in America endures.
That's from Time magazine, and they don't think this is they don't think this is a bad thing to tell people. Time magazine thinks this is very cute. What would be your so all I'm saying is, imagine if Trump said, hey, there's a secret cabal working behind the scenes to censor free speech that would hurt the Biden campaign. They would call him crazy. This is what Time magazine is actually uncovering and almost bragging about. Max, what is your response to this article in Time magazine?
Well, it just reminds me of a dynamic that played out throughout the Trump era, where early on, when Trump noticed that there were elements within the national security state, within big tech, and within the general architecture of the permanent government that transitions from administration to administration with a predominant ideology of centrism, that he was being targeted by the deep state, that he was called a conspiracist. And they said, Trump, you're crazy. There is no deep state. I remember David Remnick at the New Yorker, he wrote an article about how the deep state simply doesn't exist. Then, as the Trump administration proceeded, there were a flurry of articles about how the deep state not only exists, but it's great because it's fighting Trump, and we need to love the deep state. I don't know if it was Nicholas Kristof at the New York Times who wrote a tribute to the deep state, but then, all of the never-Trumpers and the neoliberals, they all became, deep state firsters, or they love the deep state. And so this article, it reflects the same dynamic where basically after January 6th, all these people who effectively are a part of what you could call the deep state and are certainly a part of the Democratic Party's kind of corporate scaffolding and legal scaffolding and big tech as well, they all want credit for taking Trump out because everyone hates Trump so much. He's going to be put on trial effectively. They want credit. They're like, we did it. We conspired. We were a secret cabal. We shut down pro-Trump information. We censored people. We put pressure on the tech giants, and the tech giants are doing whatever we want now. They're in our pocket. We don't know what deals were cut there. Did they say, okay, we won't go so hard on you. We won't try to regulate you and break up your ghastly monopoly, Mark Zuckerberg? We don't know what took place there, but they're proud of what they did. And it's only weirdos like us who see something slightly wrong with it.
Weirdos like us indeed. This is from World Socialist website. Facebook purges left-wing pages and individuals by Andre Damon. On Friday, Facebook carried out a purge of left-wing, anti-war, and progressive pages and accounts, including leading members of the Socialist Equality Party. Facebook gave no explanation why the accounts were disabled or even a public acknowledgement that the deletions had occurred. Your account has been disabled. For more information, please visit the Help Center. Your account was disabled on January 22nd, 2021. If you think your account was disabled by mistake, you can submit more information via the Help Center for up to 30 days after your account was disabled. After that, your account will be permanently disabled and you will no longer be able to request a review. At least a half dozen leading members of the Socialist Equality Party had their Facebook accounts permanently disabled. This included the public account of Genevieve Lay, the National Secretary of the International Youth and Students for Social Equality, and the personal account of Niles Niemuth, the U.S. Managing Editor of the World Socialist website. Ding, ding, ding! In 2016, Niemuth was the Socialist Equality Party's candidate for U.S. Vice President. Facebook also disabled the London Bus Drivers Rank and File Committee Facebook page, which was set up with the support of the Socialist Equality Party in the UK to organize opposition among bus drivers. This follows a widely discussed call for a walkout by bus drivers to demand elementary protections against the COVID-19 pandemic. None of the individuals whose accounts were disabled had violated Facebook's policies. Upon attempting to appeal the deletion of their account, they received an error message stating, "We cannot review the decision to disable your account." With no explanation or warning, Facebook has effectively seized the intellectual property of those it has targeted, cutting them off from years of their photos, writings, and online discussions. Skipping ahead, the World Socialist website has for years warned about the crackdown on left-wing political organizations by Facebook, Twitter, and Google. Since the 2016 election, the U.S. intelligence agencies have advocated internet censorship in the name of fighting fake news. While these actions have been presented as targeting far-right conspiracy theories, they have, in fact, disproportionately affected left-wing, anti-war, and socialist organizations. In 2017, Google announced that it would promote authoritative news sources over alternative viewpoints, leading to a massive drop in search traffic to left-wing sites. Ding, ding, ding! World Socialist website editorial board chairman David North published an open letter to Google on August 25, 2017, demanding that it stop the censorship of socialist, anti-war, and progressive sites. Censorship on this scale is political blacklisting, North wrote. The obvious intent of Google's censorship algorithm is to block news that your company does not want reported and to suppress opinions with which you do not agree. Skipping to Caitlin Johnstone, tyranny by propaganda is tyranny by force. Caitlin weighs in by saying, for most of recorded history, domination by brute force has been the norm for human civilization. Someone claws his way into a position of power over the other humans and you obey and respect him or he'll have his goons attack you. As people became more educated and more aware of what's going on in their world, they began to decide that they didn't much like being attacked by the ruler's goon squad whenever they stepped out of line. Because there are a lot more ordinary people than rulers, this forced an end to the practice of rule by overt brute force tyranny in some parts of the world. So a few things changed. First, we began to see rulers shipping their violent goon squad enforcers overseas. While it is now taboo to openly butcher members of your citizenry who oppose you, it is considered perfectly acceptable to send troops across the sea to destroy foreign nations which disobey your dictates. Second, since it is no longer considered appropriate to physically force your nation's citizens to comply with your agendas, we've seen a shift to psychologically compelling them to comply instead. Now, instead of being compelled to advance the interests of the powerful under threat of being bashed in the head, we are psychologically manipulated into advancing those interests by mass media propaganda and other forms of narrative control. The real world and the narrative world. We each inhabit two very different worlds simultaneously, the real world and the narrative world. Manipulators exploit the differences between these worlds to trade narrative world currency for real world resources. With the murderous goon squads now doing their business overseas and our rulers now chaining our minds instead of our bodies, things look a lot more civilized. But they aren't really. They still get everything they want, and if we ever want anything that inconveniences them, they simply manipulate us in a more convenient direction. Being manipulated into voting for and consenting to the agendas of the powerful is not meaningfully different from having the agendas of the powerful forced upon you. People think of control by propaganda differently from control via brute physical force because we have a tendency to imagine that the body and mind are separate. Chaining people's bodies looks tyrannical while chaining their minds does not, but as far as the powerful are concerned, they accomplish the same goal. The unaware believe that civilized society has dispensed with tyranny and moved to democracy where people enact their will through voting. And I'll break in and say that Time Magazine's use of the word democracy in their fucked up article is a perfect example of what Kate is describing. The more aware see that this democracy is an illusion because the will of the public has been totally hijacked by a mass-scale psychological manipulation by the powerful, but still see this movement away from brute force tyranny as a major victory. The truly lucid see that while psychological abuse is in some ways preferable to physical abuse, I don't see it that way. All the powerful have really done is move the chain from around our necks to around the thought bubbles above our heads. As far as the powerful care, nothing has changed. Skipping ahead, we will not be truly free until we free ourselves of this psychological domination. We will not free ourselves of this psychological domination until we see it the same way we see tyranny enacted by physical brute force. We need to learn to not just perceive the chains around the mind, but to view them as just as shocking, horrifying, and unacceptable as chains around the body. Until then, it won't matter what else we do. People talk about forming viable third parties to upend the status quo, but as long as the psychological chains are in place, they'll just manipulate that new three-party paradigm in the same way they manipulate the two-party one currently. People talk about staging a leftist takeover of one of the two parties, but again, as long as the mass-scale manipulation machine is in effect, that dynamic will keep coming down in favor of the powerful. And I don't know how we're ever going to get this word out to the masses of people. We've got to make those chains visible to everyone, and we've got to make them as outrageous as physical ones. We do this by highlighting the various ways mass-scale psychological grooming is being conducted by the powerful, thereby drawing attention and awareness to what's going on. Make fighting mass-scale psychological manipulation your foremost priority. Awaken people to the fact that they are being manipulated, because manipulation only works when you don't know it's happening. Help people see the chains and you will give them the ability to remove them. Then and only then will it become possible to create a healthy world together. All positive human change is the result of expanded awareness from substance abuse recovery to civil rights. It was the expansion of awareness which forced them to move from tyranny by brute force to tyranny by manipulation. Expanding it further will force them to move off of this as well. The chain was wrapped around our bodies, now it is wrapped around our thought bubbles, and soon we will remove it altogether.